crammed in here somehow. Okay. So this is kind of my favorite little stop. It might not seem like much, but there's a lot going on here. I call this the heart and soul of the farm. So this is our carbon shed. Yeah, we call it the barn, but for sake of discussion right now, we're going to call it the carbon shed. You've all no doubt heard of the carbon economy. You've heard about cap and trade. You've heard about all sorts of things. Well, this is the practical carbon economy right here. Let me tell you how it works. So in the wintertime, the soil, which has more beings in it per handful of soil as there are people on the face of the earth.
Down.
Think about that a minute. More beings than there are people on the face of the earth in one handful of soil. Those kind of go to sleep in the wintertime. They when they get cold and frozen and all that, they don't get very active anymore. Okay? So if they get material, organic, inorganic, otherwise, in the wintertime, they can't eat it. They're not hungry. They're not eating. They're not active. They're not out on their Peloton in the morning. They're just kind of sitting there, okay? And so in the winter, when we run out of grass and begin feeding hay, and for those of you, I don't want to be assumptive here, hay is simply solar dried grass. You could call it raisin grass, okay? All right? That's all it is. Hay is just solar dried grass, all right? So just like dehydrated grapes or raisins and dehydrated plums and you can get dehydrated, all sorts of fruit, apricots, whatever, right? So this is for them. Well, they're dropping 50 pounds of goodies out their back end every day. 50 pounds. And it's kind of sloppy, okay? Urine, manure, all right? And that material is highly soluble, which means if it gets in the water, it wants to diffuse and leach in water. And it's highly volatile, which means if it gets dry, it wants to vaporize. And if you've been around, you know what that smells like, right? So, what we want to do is in the cold winter, when the soil microorganisms and biology is sleeping, we don't want to dump all that soluble and volatile nutrients into the soil any more than you'd want somebody to come to you at 2 o'clock tomorrow morning. Imagine 2 o'clock tomorrow morning, somebody comes in with a funnel, sticks it in your mouth, and tamps Thanksgiving dinner into you. About 3 o'clock, you'd be doing something else, right? Okay, that's the way the soil is, all right? So, we want to hold those precious nutrients and keep them from leaching or vaporizing until the soil biology wakes up, then we can go feed them. Now, the orthodoxy in our whole country, the orthodoxy for accomplishing this is slurry systems. And you see farms with great big, blue tanks and silos and lagoons. See the Smithfield hog factories, North Carolina. You see all these. It's all water-based. It's all slurry-based systems. Okay, and you spread this manure out on your fields. What we do is we use a carbonaceous diaper, like a sponge. So right over here is carbon. This is our carbon storage shed. It can be wood chips, junk hay, old hay fodder, leaves, sawdust, peanut hulls. I mean, if it's brown, we want it, okay? Carbon over here, storing. Then over here, we're going to feed this hay in these boxes. So the cows put their head in here, they eat the hay in these boxes that are on pulleys that we can raise and lower so that as the carbonaceous diaper builds up, we can keep cranking up the hay boxes And by the time we get to spring, this might be 4 feet deep in here. All right? Imagine 4 feet deep here. The cows are standing up here. That's why we have the high signs so the cows don't fall out of the barns. Okay? So this just continues to grow up. Now those cows are heavy and they're tromping out the oxygen, so that deep bedding pack, that carbonaceous diaper, is anaerobic. Okay? That means it's fermenting without oxygen. All right, it's anaerobic. And so, as we build this bedding pack, we add corn to it. The corn then, the cows, they crop it all in. The corn then ferments in this bedding pack. So in the spring, when the cows come out and start grazing again, the grass begins to grow, we put in pigs. The pigs then seep the fermented embedded corn, churn it all up like a big egg beater, oxygenate it, aerate it, and turn it from anaerobic to aerobic compost. It composts beautifully, and then we spread it out on the fields, and that's our fertilizer. So that's the fertility program, okay? And what feeds it is the carbon. So the carbon is generated from any source we can find. Most of ours comes on site here on the farm from tree work, cleaning a fence line, taking down a bunch of junky trees, crooked trees, upgrading the woodlight. Okay, and so as we start working with this carbon economy in situ, as a fertilizer program, you begin realizing the potential. Again, that's the practical daily application. But if you back the camera up a little bit and take a broader view, you realize that if we took all of the money we currently spend on chemical fertilizer, fire control, and insurance paying for burning buildings and infrastructure, and if we invested that in proper forest management, not only would we have far more productive forests, but we would have high organic matter soils, more earthworms, and we would be sequestering carbon in the soil instead of letting it volatilize off in the air. The other thing that we would have is we would have then suddenly a brand new industry, a brand new vocation to honor people who like to work outside with their hands. We have spent now 2 generations marginalizing people who want to work outside in blue-collar work. I mean, when's the last time you heard a guidance counselor in a high school tell an up-and-coming honor student senior, "Wow, Mary, your grades are so good, you're so smart, that you should be a farmer"? No. Farming is reserved for the C- to F+ students or less, okay? And so I'm suggesting that this model would create thousands and thousands and thousands of little 5-, 6-person crews out in our woodlands, both public and private, eliminating fires, creating carbon, eliminating chemical fertilizers, feeding earthworms, who can come home at the end of the day, and when their little children ask them, "Well, Mommy, Daddy, what did you do today?" they can tell their children, "What we did was we upgraded the forests and created a carbon base for compost to build soil for nutrient-dense food so that you'll have a better place to live in than we have." And I suggest that that's a valuable legacy, and we desperately need sacred, noble affirmation for people in our culture who don't aspire to simply fight the expressway, to spend the day in a Dilbert cubicle pressing numbers into cyberspace all day. We need to make room for the other 40% is the kind of the root number, 40% of the population who likes to have calluses and splinters in their hands and affirm them as important people in our culture. So there's a broad picture here, very practical, growing earthworms, but the implications are broad, socially, culturally, and community-wide. Last thing, when we came to the farm in 1961, I was just 4. When we came here, in 1961, we averaged 1% organic matter. When I was the size of these little kids here, I can well remember walking these fields and never setting foot on a piece of vegetation. That's how barren they were. There were large areas, quarter acre in size, that were nothing but rock. Nothing but rock. I mean, not weeds, not grass, not just rock. Where all the top, we'd lost anywhere from 5 to 8 feet of topsoil since the Europeans came through tillage and erosion. There were gullies. One gully we measured was 16 feet deep. You know how much soil leaves a chasm 16 feet deep from the top to the bottom of the gully, okay? Today we average 8.2% organic matter, from 1% to 8%. Every 1% increase stores an additional 20,000 gallons of water per acre. So 7 percentage points times 20,000 is 140,000 gallons, times 100 acres, to say 14 million gallons that we can now hold that you couldn't hold in 1961. I'm not bragging. I'm simply giving humble gratitude and appreciation for a system of abundance that's here for us to appreciate and massage. So often in modern agriculture, we have this idea that nature is this reluctant partner that we've got to control and get in a half Nelson and wrestle with, and I've got to make you produce this and get this and yeah. I would suggest that nature is actually a benevolent lover, just desiring to be caressed in the right places. That's a real different way of looking at our ecological umbilical. And I think it's a much more productive way. Questions? Says this is the year. I just think that's great theater. Another question, yes.
With your bedding, you said it was 4 feet deep. Like, how often do you turn it? Like when you come springtime, the pigs obviously don't dig 4 feet down. Like how often do you turn it or remove the top layer?
Okay, great question. So 4 feet. We have not found a pig that will go 4 feet deep, but a big pig will go 3 feet deep. So now it doesn't always get 4 feet deep. I mean, if we have a warm fall and we don't feed that very much hay, we might come in the spring with just 2 feet deep. Well, then they can go to the bottom, no problem. Okay, but if it's 4 feet, what we do is we let them take the top 2, and of course the pigs are, they're not stupid. They're not going to go 3 feet until they've cleaned off everything that's 1 foot, right? So they turn it multiple times as they go down, and we actually, depending on when we start in the winter, I mean, we know we're going to get grass around, from somewhere between March 1st and March 15th, okay? So beginning when we start, we kind of know how long we're going to have to feed, okay? And so depending on when we start, we lay a lot more corn in the bottom than we do in the top. So we can reward them for digging deeper because they got to move the overburden. It's like a miner, You're underwater all the time. Well, these pigs are like miners, and so they're taking off the top and then they return it and go. So they turn it multiple times as they go through, but we tend to put more in the bottom knowing that they've got to work harder to get to the bottom. If it's 4 feet deep, we take the top 2 off, put the pigs in another spot, clean off that top 2, spread that in the field, and then put the pigs back in and let them go on down the other 2 feet.
Okay.
Yeah. We're looking for one that'll go for, but we have a pig that big I might not want to have.
What breed do you have?
That pig might put me in the hole wrong with the pig, yeah. And one of the beauties of this, of using the pigs to do this work is that it fully honors the pigness of the pig. The pig is now not just bacon and sausage and pork chops, the pig is now a co-laborer, a fellow team player in this great land healing ministry. See? And that changes the whole spiritual, emotional relationship with our partners that we're raising. Another question. Anybody got a quick? Yes, ma'am.
How long do you aim to keep the pigs in the barn?
How long do we keep the pigs in the barn? So the pigs are in here generally about 6 weeks. Now, you can go longer, or you can go shorter. There are a couple little principles. One is that we don't put all the pigs in the whole area at one time. So we've got enough space here to put 300 head under roof here and at the far barn up there. So we don't want to put more than about 15 pigs in a group, because if you put more than that, what you get is you get workers and you get non-workers. You get producers and you get lazies. And so by grouping them in small groups, everybody has to earn their own bread. And so they tend to work better. What happens when you put way too many is the workers finally get tired and give up. And the whole thing just breaks down. Probably a good rule for, like government programs there as well. So they're in small groups, and the other thing is that the corn doesn't last forever. Once that corn starts to ferment, you've got a clock ticking to where it eventually ferments away. I mean, the juices, the carbohydrates, they literally ferment away. All you got is the skin, all right? So, and that's about 130, 140 days. And the problem is, this is a first in, last out inventory. So all those things have to enter into your mind. Now, you can extend it a little bit with something like barley or oats that have not been dehusked. Leave the husk on them, and you can go a little longer, maybe up to 175 or 180 days. But I can tell you, having done that the pigs really like the corn because it's bigger pieces. It's just bigger pieces, so they get a bigger chunk, for their work, as opposed to a barley or small grain. Yeah. Maybe one more question and we'll go. Yes.
Are you feeding the pigs anything else while they're in there?
Great question. When the pigs are in here, we don't feed them anything else. That fermented corn stuff. And the other thing is, another nuance of it is, if all you use here is a wood carbon, the carbon is too high. What you want is a carbon-nitrogen ratio about 30 to 1. If you go higher than that, in the composting process, it gets too hot too fast and actually burns out many of the nutrients. So we want a very gentle, cool, some of you are familiar with the term biodynamic. We're not biodynamic, but I think in this respect, they've got it right. You don't want a compost that gets hot. You want it to not go over about 120, 130, okay? Which is one reason we're not organic certified. If we were organic certified, we would have to prove that every square inch of this went over 140 degrees. Well, using pigs to do it and wanting a cooler, gentle compost with all the enzymes and biology intact, we don't want it to go over 140. So organic certification would destroy the quality and the genius of the whole biological process. So, yeah. Oh, organic certification, government programs, just forget it. Just forget it. I mean, the level of adulteration that's happened since it started, from 20 years ago, is profound. I mean, when Senator Patrick Leahy from Vermont put in the enabling legislation, it was all about soil, and we're the only country in the world that's now certifying organic hydroponics. There's no other country in the world that will allow soilless organic certification except us. And of course that makes all the other countries hate us, because we're the ones that are compromised, adulterated, and flying in the face of everything that every organic producer knows is the foundation is the soil. Okay. So anyway, back to the corn. I got sidetracked. The cool. Okay, yeah. So every fourth time we bed, we use junk hay, which has a much lower carbon nitrogen ratio than anything from wood, and that keeps our CN ratio low enough so it doesn't fire fang, so it doesn't get so hot. Well, believe it or not, so we just throw in a bunch of old junky, moldy, rained on, hay, twice what the cows will eat. They eat half of it, and Trump will have their half in and pee on it, and that's the bedding, instead of putting this in, all right? Interestingly, that fermented, pickled, squishy, urinated on, junky hay is like Breyer's ice cream to a pig. And they will find those clumps of pickled hay, and I mean that juice, I'll call it juice to be kind, that juice is just drooling down there. I mean, and they're just happy as can be. It's amazing. So they supplement themselves with other things. You can tell a lot when you come out and check them. If they're happy, you can tell it, and if they're starting to get discontent, you can tell that too. Yeah, great. Okay, let's jump on the wagons now. We're going to head up over the hill and go move the cows.